Hello, my Halloweeny friends! In this video, I will show you how to draw a pumpkin in 3 different levels, and as a bonus, I will show you how to draw a carved pumpkin face, because no Halloween pumpkin is complete without one. I'm using Adobe Fresco to draw these, but you can use the same trick in Photoshop, Procreate, or Sketchbook. Let's get started! Let's draw a pumpkin the easy way. First, let's draw our shapes with a hardbound brush. Draw a crooked circle for the pumpkin in a yellow-orange, and on a separate layer, a jagged stem in either green or brown. On yet another separate layer, create your guides. These will be clipped to the main pumpkin body with the same brush and in any color you want. These guides will tell us where we have to create depth to give the pumpkin its look. Draw white C's, like the letter C, towards the left side of the pumpkin and inverted C's on the right-hand side. You want to have a look like a clementine or like a mandarin. I recommend you start at the stem. And also keep in mind that the gaps between these lines become wider towards the front and smaller towards the sides and back because they're further away. The next step is to add depth with shadow and highlights. Now grab a saffron brush with a size of 20 at least and a darker orange and go over those guidelines. This will create the illusion of depth. What you want to do is place that where the pumpkin starts to curve where there should be shadow. My source light is coming from the top left, so the stronger and wider shadows I will be creating on the right and bottom. I like to adjust the opacity of the layer because I want the transition from the shadow to the pumpkin to be soft. Now let's repeat this step with a new layer, but this time we're going to use a saffron brush size 10 or smaller. This creates a more concentrated brush stroke so that when you're drawing there's a stronger line, but it still has that softness around for a soft color transition. I recommend playing around with the layer settings. For example, use the multiply blending mode and also play with the opacity until you're happy with the transition of the color. Once you're happy with the shadow, it's time to add the highlight. Here again, I use a saffron brush in an orange just slightly lighter than what the pumpkin's color is, and we start again with a size of 20 or more. Pro tip, I like to use the brightness sliders to keep the same hue and color. The main light, as I mentioned, is coming from the left, so all the pumpkin wedges, if you will, have the highlight on the left. Towards the right hand side of the pumpkin, there will still be some areas of highlight, but mostly towards the top of the pumpkin, but not in the entire wedges. Repeat this step with a saffron brush size 10 or less for a little bit of a faint right line. To balance this out, I add more shadow on the right bottom of the pumpkin with the same method as saffron brush of size 20 or more. Finish then the stem the exact same way you did the pumpkin by creating faint lines following the shapes and few horizontal lines where these jagged edges are so that you break up the stem, and add shadows towards the right hand side and bottom, especially under the stem, and then highlights on the left and top. Next, let's draw a pumpkin intermediate difficulty. The main differences that you will be seeing between the levels easy, intermediate, expert is color accuracy, level of detail, and the nuance of texture. So at this level, we're going to build up what we already created at level easy. For the second pumpkin, instead of drawing a circle this time, we're going to draw pumpkin wedges. Think of it like a mandarin or a clementine. These lines will also help us as guides for the shadows. The stem again was jagged in a green-brown tone. It almost looks like a witch hat with the base being like an oval if you look a bit closely. Same as before, we want to build up the shadows and highlights in the exact same manner that we did before. For a more natural effect this time, I used a rough brush, give the shadow and lines a bit more texture and making it a little bit more realistic. This time I also used 3 colors for the shadows and 3 colors for the highlights to create again a more nuanced yet smoother transition between the colors. And at the very end, I used a splasher brush to give the pumpkin a bit of a texture. The next level is expert level. We continue to build on what we've already been doing. This time we will use a reference image so that we know exactly what a realistic pumpkin looks like that we can mimic. For this level, the most important skill is your observation skill. For example, you can see as you're drawing wedges that corners are a bit more squarish. It's not fully round, that it doesn't have even shape all throughout, that the wedges each look slightly different. All that is going to add up to a more realistic pumpkin result. Like for the intermediate version, we will start drawing the shape of pumpkin as our reference. Remember, we're trying to mimic it, don't worry about it being exactly the same. The reference also helps us choose colors. Grab color picker to select more realistic pumpkin color. If you compare it to the previous colors, this is a little bit lighter and a little more yellowy. However, there's tons of different types of pumpkins, so it depends on your reference. In the previous version, I focused on the shadows and lines with minimal highlights. In this version, however, we will build texture of the pumpkin with more specific strokes and brushes. Here you can see me trying out the different types of brushes that I have. The brushes that I use are usually the Kyle Webster ones that are available to Creative Club members, and another set is from a previous course that I did. You can see how I sort of blocked the area in lighter orange where I want to add the texture and highlight. So in this case, we are building from dark to light. So we're lightening every stroke that we add, we're creating more light. Now you want to apply the colors a little bit more patchy with different orange tones. I played a lot with different brushes until I found those that resemble the effect of the reference photo. Pumpkin is not quite smooth, so there's a lot of nuance in the color. So when you look at the reference here, you will see the highlights that I'm trying to mimic on my pumpkin. Then you want to just repeat the same steps with the stem. Now let's draw some carved pumpkin faces. Just select whatever pumpkin you love most, duplicate it, and on a separate layer to it, draw with a black hardbound brush the shape of eyes, nose, and mouth. You can play around with different shapes, but I suggest that you create sort of triangular or square shapes because when you're carving a pumpkin, it's really difficult to get smooth curves with a knife. Also consider the wedges of the pumpkin and the overall curves that it has. Your black shapes should follow those curves for it to be more realistic instead of just being slapped on. To get cleaner and crisp edges, I recommend you use the eraser. Now create clipping mask, and on this layer we're going to paint this thick skin that we can see from the pumpkin once it's been carved. This is usually a lighter color, so take a slightly lighter color than your pumpkin color. You want to only draw this on one side, so in mine I chose the opposite side of where the light source was coming from. I felt that was more realistic. You want to only draw one side because it is unlikely for you to see all the sides. And there you have it. We have created 3 pumpkins and 3 carved faces for Halloween. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if so, please let me know by subscribing and with a like. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!